And, oh, sorry. Good evening, everyone. This will not be a 90-minute workshop. The recording secretary position is pretty straightforward. That is why I plan to go through it and answer your questions at the end. I am the current but outgoing recording secretary for 33rd. Also with us is Krista Richardson, and she will be the incoming recording secretary for 33rd in 22 days. So yeah, we'll be able to answer your questions hopefully at the end if we don't cover it in the presentation. So let's get started. So these are our objectives for tonight, to get you guys to understand your basic roles and responsibilities and recognize what actually belongs in the minutes and understand the importance of the minutes and the record retention. The role is, your role in the minutes are important because minutes are the legal permanent record of a PTA as a nonprofit organization and are kept forever. So, you know, yes, you are just taking notes, but they are extremely important to your PTA. So the secretary is responsible for keeping accurate records of all proceedings of the PTA. And like I said, what goes in the minutes is vital to running your PTA. If there are no minutes, then it's like there was never a meeting because there's no proof about what was discussed or any decisions or actions that were taken. So we usually say if it's not in the minutes, it didn't happen. And just to name an example, the bank may need to see your minutes to change bank signers because they want to know that those are the people authorized by the organization to act in a fiscal manner. If you're audited by the IRS or if you have an insurance claim, another reason why your minutes would need to be shown and in good order. So to prepare for the meetings, you know, these are some of the things you'll be doing. Most PTAs, well, okay, so some PTAs have a recording secretary and a corresponding secretary. So if not, you as recording secretary will probably do all of these things. If your unit does have a corresponding secretary, you know, just check and see how you guys are going to work together. In general, the recording secretary is the one that takes the minutes and maintains the historical records of the organization. And the corresponding secretary is usually the one that sends out meeting notices and reads mail received, writes letters, that type of stuff. So check your bylaws and with your president and your board to make sure you're not overstepping and see how you work together. So this is just some basic agenda information. The agenda should always have the call to order, the adoption of the agenda, and the approval of the minutes at the beginning. After that, the agenda order will kind of depend on what your unit needs to do and what you need to take care of. And you'll end the minutes with the adjournment followed by your name. And under that, your title, which is obviously recording secretary. Unless someone's taking notes for you, then that person should be elected as soon as the meeting is called to order, and they'll type up the minutes and end with the title recording secretary pro tem, which means, you know, just for the time being. So yeah. These are some of the items that you may need. You know, it probably looks a little different for virtual meetings. As far as bylaws, make sure that you have the current and signed version of your unit bylaws. Robert's Rules of Order is handy. The latest edition, I think, is the 12th edition. And you may need sign-in sheet or a template to record attendance if it's an in-person meeting. And that's, besides all of it. Another thing you may or may not use is motion form. It is not required to use motion forms. It's up to you and your board to decide if it's something you want to use. But you may find that it helps you record the motions more accurately. So the information you would need on the motion form is the date, the person's name that's making the motion, the text of the motion written out clearly, and then the disposition if it's adopted or failed. But it's a suggestion. It's not something that you do have to use. If someone, starts to make a motion, you can hand them a form and come back to them until that's ready. And you can save the motion form till the end of the year, should there be a question about the maker and what they wrote. But you do not need to put these in your permanent record. So at the meeting, you take attendance. So you can do that on a sign-in sheet, roll call, or the registration list if you're, having people register for a virtual meeting. Verify that quorum was met. If quorum is not met, then the meeting becomes strictly informational. You'll still take minutes, but there will be no motions or actions taken during that meeting if there is no quorum. For virtual meetings and recording, ask permission. If anyone objects, you cannot record the meeting. And also do not keep the recordings. Let the membership know that you'll keep them for maybe a week or two until your minutes are done. And then you'll delete the recording because recordings are not the legal record. And then presenting recommendations. Recommendations are motions that come from the executive board and are brought before the association for adoption. So it is basically a motion, but it comes from another body, from the executive board to the association. And I think the rest is pretty clear. So taking the minutes, just some simple pointers. They are minutes and not seconds. You'll work off the agenda. However, minutes follow the actual order of the meeting. And that may not always be exactly the agenda order. These are obviously things the minutes should include. The type of meeting, it would be either an association meeting, executive board meeting, or a committee meeting. Quorum, we already discussed. If quorum is not met, it's strictly informational. The approval of the previous meeting minutes would be either as written or corrected. You'd also include a summary of the treasurer's report, which is the beginning balance, total income, total expenses, and the ending balance. You'll obviously include the full treasurer's report to the minutes, but that is the only thing that you need to record in your minutes. List of payments authorized, expenditures ratified, bills to be paid. As far as motions, noting the person's name, making the motion, and then the result. And you may want to include the bottom, make sure you have page numbers. And maybe a list of attachments so that when you're reading your minutes, you know what is supposed to follow and be attached, included in that set for that meeting. Okay, so just a couple of don'ts. So other than the wording of motions and actions, the minutes are not a record of what was actually said. But it is helpful to note like the topic of discussion and some general points raised. And never include personal, inflammatory, or confidential statements. So then after the meeting, this would be your responsibility. Collect the sign-in sheet. It helps with your list of attendance. And like I mentioned, the agenda, all financial reports, including treasurer's reports, auditor's reports, which is like twice a year, maybe once or twice. Nominating committee report, those are all things you would include with your minutes when you go get to the binding section part of it. So make sure you collect everything. And try to complete the minutes as soon as you can after the meeting, you know, when everything's fresh in your memory. I know if I wait a day or two, it's like, oh shoot, and I can't always read my notes if I'm not fast enough. So yeah, try to finish them as soon as you can, and then email them to your president first before you send them out to everybody else for review and approval, which actually I think I'm skipping. Oh no, not yet. Correcting the minutes. That, well, wait a minute. Did I go back? Oh, looks like I'm missing one. I'm missing a slide. Usually I cover approving the minutes, but maybe that's not here. So that would be after the meeting, approving the minutes. So your minutes are presented for approval at the next meeting of the group as a standard agenda item. And this action is recorded in 2 different places in the master copy. So it's in the minutes of your current meeting, where you'll note that the previous meeting minutes were approved either as written or as corrected. And then you list the corrections. And then the minutes of that previous meeting that were approved, you write the word approved and date after your signature and the title. So yeah, and then as far as correcting the minutes, so corrections to the minutes are made when they're presented for approval at a meeting, but they can also, correction can also be made at a subsequent meeting when an error is discovered. However, only the group involved in the meeting may correct the minutes from one of their previous minutes. And to record a correction in your master copy, it is in red ink font. So you'd circle the incorrect word, and then in the margin, you write the correction and date with your initials. And then, so after the meetings and the binding part, so these are the things that all get bound, which means you have your minutes and the additional documents that you've collected, all becomes one file. So this is basically already towards the end. And there's the next slide will cover the different binding options on how you keep your record. But so yeah, if the year winds down, you'll prepare your council or unit's permanent record. Take all those documents that you've saved throughout the year, and then find out where and how your permanence records are stored. There's, I think that's the next one. Oh no. Okay, so there's we covered the list of what needs to be included. And then these are the ways to bind your minutes and get your permanent record. There's what we call traditional binding, where as you go along, you print them out, sign them as needed, prepare a cover sheet, and then you have them bound, professionally bound at an office supply store or a print shop. What we call DIY binding is where you print the documents to be bound, sign them as needed, prepare a cover sheet, but you're gluing them in a, oh shoot, help me out here. It's not a notebook, but so some would glue them as you go along instead of collecting them in like a 3-ring binder and then getting them professionally bound. And now we can also store them digitally. Keep in mind that when you store them digitally, that is password protected. And that if you have a set of minutes, it's not just your minutes, that file has to include all the documents that you've collected. So the treasurer's report needs to be attached, the audit report, the nominating committee report, all that goes with the set of minutes and is one file. So one PDF form, just like you would in either traditional or your DIY binding. And so a non-editable PDF on a password protected server, Google Drive, or just to name one. And then since we are able to store them digitally, I know that's convenient, but I do recommend to keep 2 records, whether it's digital and like you can, at that point, if your digital version is your permanent record, you can take your printed versions and put them in a 3-ring binder. And at that point, a 3-ring binder is okay. But if you're doing just your traditional binding, and that is your permanent record, make sure that it's not just a 3-ring binder. Because your permanent record is supposed to be like exactly that, permanent, where they can't edit it. So yeah, little recap. Secretary works closely with the president and the board. Your minutes are the legal documents and must be kept permanently. There is a retention record that is on the Capitol website. Then that's just if you're curious as to what else needs to be kept. But yes, your minutes are a legal document, permanent document. And then no, I think everything else speaks for itself. Just some additional resources. I know California State PTA website now is what they have the new leaders guide. So you would log on and sign up for that. And that's kind of like the toolkit. It has a lot of information. It has your secretary job description. And after this meeting, we will be emailing out the slideshow as well as a handout. And the handout is all the blabbering I did. It just has it in like a nice, neat 9-page document for you to read or refer to if you need to at any point. And that is it. Short, sweet, and to the point. But I welcome any questions you might have.
So I'll go through the questions I see in the chat. Some of them you answered. Can PTA meetings be recorded?
Yeah, I did answer that, I believe. But that's totally fine. I know I talk a little fast. But yes, they can be recorded and you can use them to listen back and take your minutes. You just do not keep the recordings. Keep them maybe for a week or 2 max and then delete it. The recordings are not the permanent record. But yeah, and ask for permission. I mean, if someone objects to being recorded, then you cannot. So that's pretty much it.
Do we need to list quorum for association meetings as well?
Yes. Yes, you will use either a roll call or a sign-in sheet to determine whether quorum was met. And at that point, you're good to take care of business. And you can, in your minutes, those in attendance, you can just simply state see sign-in sheet and attach that to your minutes. Or like I said, you could do a roll call, make sure you know who's here. And then just list them in your minutes, alphabetical order. And then simple statement, quorum was met or not met. And again, then it becomes an informational meeting. You can still meet and share information, but no actions.
Is the adoption of the agenda just a motion, majority or 2/3? If it is a timed agenda, does that also need to be motioned for approval?
The agenda, I am not sure about a timed agenda. I'll be honest. I don't think we've ever done that. But the agenda is adopted and it's more along the lines of general consent. Are there any, the president of the state, are there any changes or corrections to the agenda? And then hearing none, the agenda is adopted as presented. Or if there's changes, list the changes and it'll be adopted as amended.
When do minutes need to be posted for the association?
Okay, so when, you can still post them, right before the meeting. It depends on in person, or virtual. You can email it out, if people register for your virtual meeting, you can email it to your members. For approval, you can screen share if you're doing a virtual, read through them and approve them that way. But yeah.
Will there be
The minutes is not, it's the meeting notices that have a time frame to them. Like when your meeting is going to be held, give the 10-day notice or the 7-day notice, depending on the type of meeting, but not the minute.
Will there be a sample format email to us, or can we get samples on the PTA sites?
I haven't found one on the site. The handout has, that you will get, does have a basic layout and sample. I have a personal sample that I use, which is, it's handy, but it's nothing official. So if you want that, it'll be not a Google Doc. It'll be a Word doc that I can email. But is that okay to email from my recording secretary email, Marcy, or should I do that from my personal since it's not an official PTA document?
Send it from your recording secretary email. That's fine.
Okay.
It's
I
okay.
can include that when we send out the stuff.
Yep. Just
Most people are interested in it. I can share it.
or
If
tack
you
it
don't-
onto the stuff you want me to send, and I'll send it out to everyone.
Okay.
No worries.
So I'll email or Marcy will email the handout, the slides, and then I will include the minutes sample Word document. Okay.
Can the motion for adoption be repeated again, please?
For the minutes, adopting the minutes, they'll be reviewed. The question is, are there any corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes stand as printed or presented. If there are corrections to the minutes, you will list them in the minutes, make the correction in the actual original, and then the minutes will be adopted as corrected.
Can PTA pay for the secretary to upgrade their account from the standard 30 minutes? I'm assuming this is for Zoom, so you can record your meeting. Natalie, is that right? You can just unmute and let me know if that's what you're asking.
Sorry, that is correct. That was what I was asking.
That's really something that your board needs to decide. For 33rd District, we don't record our meetings. It's all, Linda does all the, does it all by hand. She's great at it. That's something your board has to decide. As far as Zoom, our district PTA, we do pay for a Zoom account that we use for workshops and meetings. But that's really up to your board to decide.
And that'll be in your budget and approved. So the only reason the secretary would see that is because she'd make sure that motion gets approved for that budget. But yeah, that's definitely a board decision.
Oh, I skipped one. How do we state recommendations made to the board in the minutes?
Recommendations that are coming from the executive board to the association. Now, and not everybody does that. They may just make, but a recommendation is a motion. It will be the executive board recommends, and I move that we sign a contract with this vendor for that event. So it's a motion. It just doesn't need a second because it's already been discussed and handled at the executive board. So that's when we call it a recommendation, but it is basically a motion. It's when you have a regular motion, it's I move to approve this and that. The recommendation is the executive board recommends and I move that we approve this. And then because it's a motion / recommendation, you take a vote and it either passes or it either adopted or failed.
Someone said, a lot of this flew over my head. I'm new to this and I'm still confused. Is there a sample video with more specifics for us new members?
You will get the slides and you will get my handout. My handout has everything that you need. I talked too fast and it did go like this. I tried to keep it as short as I could because it's basic information, but there is what seems like a lot. But the handout covers everything and from beginning to end. My unofficial Word document sample minutes, you'll obviously have to tailor it to your unit as far as your officers and that kind of stuff. But that sample that I'll attach will have the wording in there too. So basically, if you can kind of copy and paste, tweak the officers depending on what your unit has. But other people have found it helpful. So hopefully you will too. And if you have questions, please reach out. The email, which is recordingsec@33rdpta.org. Let me go back. That one will stay the same. After 22 days, I will not be answering, but Krista will, and we'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Now, if you're from a unit, you probably have a recording secretary at council level that might be able to answer your questions. And that would probably be your first step, is to go to, if you're at a unit, to go to council. But we're here, whether you're council or a unit, we'll help.
How do we document missing minutes?
Missing minutes? Oh my. I wonder how they've gone missing. If it's for the current year, do your best to find someone that was there and type up the actions that were taken to the best of everybody's recollection, and try to present them as soon as possible. If it's previous years, there really isn't that much that you can do, and it's just, fix what you can and move forward. And, once you know better, you do better. But yeah, that's unfortunately the only recommendation I have. There is no fix if it's not there.
Says new to PTA board here. Do we have to create a new email account to be used specifically for PTA business?
You do not, but you can. Some units are lucky and they have it all set up. They have, like 33rd has all their 33rdpta.org, and every officer has their own email separate from your personal. But I've been at a unit in council where I'd use my personal email. It is what you and your board have set up.
Kind of what you feel most comfortable with if you don't already have your board doesn't already have emails predetermined.
Right. Yeah, if your board has it set up, use those, but it's a whatever you prefer, and you can set up your own separate from your personal, and make it Linda for PTA at gmail.com or whatever. That way you can keep it separate, but that is a personal choice. If your unit doesn't have theirs set up, then it's up to you.
Do we have to restate the entire motion? Oops, the entire motion if making a long motion in the minutes, or can we say as presented?
No, the motion has to be exactly worded. And that's why the motion forms can be helpful. If you're not used to it or your board isn't used to it, it may take some reminding and make sure you have several on hand, or like, hey, if you're doing a virtual, can you put it in the chat so I can capture exactly what I need to record? And if they're going too fast, you can say, okay, can you repeat that? Because you want to get it right. So it's okay to say, excuse me, could you repeat that, please?
Does it matter how the motion looks in the minutes? Like does it have to be all caps, bold, underlined?
The only reason I do it all caps is because it stands out and it's easier to find back. It's not a requirement to have it in all caps or underlined or any of that. You could number them, motion 1, and put the motion 1 in all caps and then list the motion and the wording there. Personally, I do all caps just so when I'm looking back, I'm like, okay, it's easy to spot in all of that.
Can you move to strike a prior motion? For example, if a motion passes and a few minutes later you get new information that makes the earlier motion moot, can you move to remove the original motion? That way your minutes don't have a bunch of contradictory motions.
Oh my. Well, you can amend the motion. When a motion is made to approve, let's say I move to approve this fundraiser on this date with that company. And then, so a motion is made. Is there a second? Someone seconds it, and then it's open for questions or comments. So at that point, you discuss. And then you find out, well, wait a minute, that date is not going to work because the school's already doing this, or that's a holiday, or so then someone can move to amend the motion by either striking something or substituting. So, instead of June 1st, we'll do it June 15th. And then, so the motion to amend will then get seconded and adopted. And then you go back to the main motion as amended. Read that new motion as amended out and vote on that. Now, if that goes over your head, I understand. There is on CAPTA website. It's all about motions, or 8 steps to making a motion. That information is available at capta.org. Whether you sign up for the leader's guide or the toolkit, that is in there, and it's amending motions. And that's for, like you said, well, wait a minute, that vendor's no good, or that date doesn't work, or that location, you can strike or substitute or remove sections of a motion. I hope that's okay. That was somewhat helpful. And that, can get a lot.
I threw that from the toolkit up in the chat. So if anybody wants to see 8 steps to making a motion, it's in the chat.
Oh, thank you.
Any other questions about minutes? I don't see any more. So Linda and I will stick around a little bit longer if you have any other questions that you'd like us to answer. I will say that the paperwork that Linda's sending out to you will be is very comprehensive. So take a look at that, and that should help you. But other than that, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Like I said, we'll stick around a little bit longer if there are any other questions that we can answer for you. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.